Our guest today served as President Obama's Chief of Staff. Prior to his Chief of Staff role, he served as Chairman of the Midwest region for J.P. Morgan Chase for over 6 years. Our guest today served as Chairman of Vice President Al Gore's 2000 presidential campaign. He served as U.S. Secretary of Commerce in the Clinton administration. Our guest today coordinated the successful campaign to pass the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. He is a graduate of Loyola University, Chicago, and the John Marshall Law School. Our guest today's father, Mayor Richard J. Daley, was a member of the City Club of Chicago for over 25 years. His brother, our guest today's brother, Mayor Richard M. Daley, has been a member of the City Club of Chicago for over 30 years. Ladies and gentlemen, Bill Daley. Bill?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jay, for that kind introduction and for the invitation to speak today to the City Club. I've said in the past, when people kind of go through my resume and go through all the jobs I've held, my mother used to say, "What's wrong? Your father held a job for 21 years. Your brother held a job for, at that time, about 16 years. Why can't you hold a job? Why do you keep?" And I'd say, "Ma, don't worry, it's working out okay." And it did work out okay. But let me thank the City Club for inviting me here again today. I've had the pleasure of speaking to the club a few times, and it is a great statement about this city and the civic involvement that the turnout for all sorts of speakers who come through here and the engagement on policy discussions is so strong in the City Club, and that's really the leadership of the board, and of course Jay and the leadership and the energy which he has put into the club. So thank you very much for having me. Father Ryan, Father Garanzini of Loyola, of which I am a graduate of, and other religious leaders who may be here, I thank you for being here today. To the elected officials, of course, who are here to take time, I appreciate it. And we should all, and having grown up in a family of many people who have held elective office, you have no idea how difficult it is on their families and the strain that is put on them. So they take a lot of grief, they take a lot of stuff from people, they know it, but it's really a sacrifice that they do for good, that they're in politics. So for them to be here with their busy schedules and their efforts to try to improve the lives of people, I really do appreciate that. Ambassador Jim Kenney, I see, who was the U.S. Ambassador Arlen, who's with us today. Before I get started, let me take a moment to reflect on the grave loss last week with the shootings in Connecticut. None of us can help but be shocked by the wanton violence, yet touched by the remarkable heroism, as Father Ryan mentioned, of the teachers and staff at Sandy Hook Elementary School. We pray for healing for the families and for all of Newtown. We hope for a better understanding of how to prevent such senseless killings. And we look forward to the day when law enforcement, mental health care, and sensible firearm controls are able to prevent such atrocities. I came here today to talk about the challenges facing our nation and our state. And I would like to focus on the role leadership must play in addressing these challenges on the national level as well as here in Illinois. The most pressing national matter is the effort of President Obama and leaders in Congress to avoid the fiscal cliff. President Obama must be wondering, whatever happened to the so-called honeymoon that's supposed to follow an election? In his first term, the banking system was breaking down. The auto industry was collapsing, and the economy faced the deepest recession in a century, all before Inauguration Day. This time, it's nearly as bad. The economy is headed towards the fiscal cliff. From the moment he was reelected, The president knew he had to persuade Congress to act and fast, or we would be right back in economic chaos. $500 billion in automatic spending cuts and tax increases would go into effect. A lengthy, destructive recession would surely follow. If I believed that was going to happen, I probably wouldn't be standing here, nor would you be sitting here. We'd probably all be back in our offices trying to sell whatever stock we own. The latest news out of Washington gives us reason to expect the president and leaders in Congress can resolve their major differences. And if they succeed, the economy will continue to recover. The president's leadership is responsible for much of the hope and promising news. Since his election nearly 7 weeks ago, he has focused our attention on how disastrous it would be for the economy to go over the cliff, and he's working to avoid it. He's put forward proposals, and he's made adjustments as circumstances warranted. He has sold his ideas to the American people and kept his political opponents at the negotiating table. The president had hoped to eliminate President Bush's tax cuts for the richest 2% of Americans. But he has compromised this week, and now the Bush tax cuts may stay in effect for all but the wealthiest 1%. The president also proposed $1.22 trillion in spending cuts over the next decade, a smaller reduction than what originally proposed, but quite sizable. $1 trillion here or there, even in Washington, is a lot of money. The progress in avoiding the fiscal cliff shows that with the right leadership, massive problems can be solved and the economy can improve. And this applies at the state level too, and it applies right here in Illinois. Illinois is a great state with vast assets and boundless potential. Factories that were once considered rusty relics are now the hub of manufacturing renaissance. Our farms produce more exports than any state in the country except California. Students from China, India, Brazil, throughout the world, and other emerging countries are flocking to our world-class universities. And a record 95 million tourists visited Illinois last year. Here in Chicago, as exemplified by you, we have a remarkable record of civic engagement that has done lasting good for our community and for our state. Yet despite all of these assets, there is no denying that Illinois is in a fiscal mess. We're facing $97 billion in unfunded pension obligations, $9 billion in unpaid bills, and a collapsing credit rating. Just last week, Moody's rating agency warned another downgrade could come, and Illinois already has the lowest credit rating of any state rated by Moody's. With forceful, effective leadership, people in our state can enjoy the benefits of better education, a stronger infrastructure, a healthier economy, and more jobs. Without it, Illinois will run into a fiscal wall. I believe so strongly in the power of effective leadership because I've had the privilege of living and working around great leaders since I was a small boy. I've seen the difference which leadership can truly make. And I don't think it'll surprise anyone in this room to hear that the first great leader in my life was my dad. He died 36 years ago today. He was born in the first decade of the last century and first became mayor almost 58 years ago. Yet because he was a great leader, we still feel his impact today. From my perspective, the best example of his leadership was the construction of the University of Illinois campus in the center of Chicago. He was convinced that poor city kids shouldn't have to travel to Urbana to get a college education from the state of Illinois. He looked at several sites, then decided the campus needed to be on the near west side in a neighborhood then known as Little Italy. This much probably most of you know. What you may not remember is that in order to build Circle Campus, 8,000 residents would have to move. 600 businesses had to relocate or shut down. Needless to say, his idea was rather controversial from the start. It took 2 tries to push through a bond referendum. Opponents questioned not only his wisdom, but his motives. People protested around our house and throughout the city. All of this was during his first term as mayor. His reelection was not guaranteed at that point. Taylor Street was one of the densest Democratic neighborhoods in the city. Yet he was willing to tear apart that stronghold, to displace 8,000 people, anger thousands more, and risk losing every single vote because he believed he was doing the right thing. Today, 28,000 students a year study at UIC. It's ranked the 10th most ethnically diverse campus in the United States. Its medical school alone has a $400 million research budget, and it's the heart of a vibrant city neighborhood. None of it would have happened without bold, political, and risky leadership. I've learned about leadership by living it, from growing up in Chicago, advising my brother, the mayor, to helping Presidents Clinton and President Obama through wrenching decisions while working for both of them. And this is what I've learned. Leadership takes vision. The vision to develop the best possible policy and to clearly communicate it, not only to your supporters, but even more important, to your opponents. It takes courage, the willingness to stand by your convictions and drive towards a solution regardless of political cost. It takes determination, the ability to maneuver your opponents towards a decision and to make inaction unacceptable. It takes compromise, making trades with negotiating partners so that political cost may be shared evenly. This may be the rarest trait in today's partisan political climate. And it takes empathy. The politicians and the stakeholders across the table are not the enemy. They don't wish the nation or the state ill. Sometimes the best way to get what you want is to understand what the other person truly needs. And finally, it takes savvy to know how and when to close the deal and where and how to round up the votes. Leaders have to get their fingernails dirty. If you've seen the movie Lincoln, you know what I mean. The president was committed to emancipation. To get it done, he engaged in seemingly some distasteful horse trading. He made very painful compromises. But Lincoln stayed true to course. And because of his determination and his savvy, we have a more humane society and an American of African descent as our president. President Clinton showed leadership. He believed that a trade pact with Canada and Mexico would be good for the economy. He had the courage to take on much of his own Democratic base, organized labor, in order to get it done. I helped the president round up the votes for the North American Free Trade Agreement, and I lived through the bare-knuckle battle over that most controversial of treaties. People still argue about NAFTA today, and it wasn't perfect. But the president believed it would make the American economy more productive and ultimately help American workers compete in what was becoming a global market. And newer free trade agreements, such as President Obama's agreement with South Korea that the United Auto Workers endorsed, probably would not have happened had we not started down the path with NAFTA. President Obama showed his mettle with a different kind of call. The decision to approve the raid to get Osama bin Laden. I was with the president in the Situation Room that day and had the honor of being in every meeting from the day I got there with him around the Osama bin Laden raid. The intelligence was imperfect, and the tactics had enormous risks for the men on that operation. But he said, go. And his lonely decision brought justice to one of history's most savage villains. The president is showing softer forms of leadership in the way in which he is negotiating the fiscal cliff. Like any good politician, he senses a change that gives him some leverage. The election has changed the politics of the day, and things are different than they were in the summer of 2011, when I tried, along with others, to reach a grand bargain on the federal debt ceiling. The ideologues who think they won the showdown with the president by walking away from the grand bargain can't afford to stand pat this time. Congress has moved towards action because they realize they can't afford the political cost of inaction. This might not qualify for a new chapter in Profiles in Courage, but in times like these, we'll take courage anywhere we can find it. Second, and without a doubt, the president has popular opinion behind him. During the election campaign, he argued his case before the American people, and his argument won. The voters sent a clear mandate, and President Obama and his opponents in Washington all know that the people expect action. This time, they must act. Are there lessons here for us in Illinois? Of course there are. Here at home, we face our own fiscal crisis. After an entire year of bumping from non-starter to false gambit to dead end, 2012 will close without major action on the $97 billion shortfall in pension funding. As we stand today, some 15% of our state budget is going towards pension payments, more than double the share just a few years ago. That $5.2 billion, which we will spend in fiscal 2013, is more than the capital budgets for the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, the University of Illinois, and the State Board of Education combined. The pension payments are more than a third the size of our entire education budget and more than a quarter of the state's healthcare budget. Gimmicks like the state's pension bonds, first introduced by Governor Blagojevich, have failed. And when Moody's warned about its outlook for Illinois' debt last week, it did so based on an expectation that January's lame duck session will close without a major fix. Let's think about that for a moment. Every other state has faced the same terrible national economy since the onset of the financial crisis in 2008. Every other state has pension obligations and big bills to pay. But Moody's is telling us Illinois has done a uniquely poor job of confronting these challenges. It's like when you were in high school and got a bad grade and explained to your mom that the class was hard. The teacher was really mean. The textbook was confusing. But then your mom would ask how your friends did on the test. And when you told her they did okay, your excuses obviously didn't carry much weight. And that's where Illinois is right now, lagging other states, and for no good reason except we haven't handled the workload. What can be frustrating to those of us outside the scrum in Springfield is the ingredients of a solution have begun to take shape, but there's still little progress. Governor Quinn's pension proposals, introduced last summer, had some promise, but they've been mostly ignored. The Speaker has helped put forward reforms, but they've not taken us far enough. President Cullerton has also put forth numerous ideas. Members of the legislature's pension working group put forward their ideas earlier this month and haven't been heard from since. Other, more aggressive proposals have been put forward that merit at least some study and discussion. This isn't about a lack of ideas. There's plenty of expertise available to hammer a workable plan out for our state. But instead of focusing on solutions, we get caught up in unproductive politics. Divisiveness keeps winning out over cooperation. Gamesmanship trumps progress. If you're in business, you're vilified. If you're in labor, you're blamed. And if you're a politician, oftentimes we think maybe they just don't know what to do. In the midst of the mess, one point is worth noting. It is not right to blame the workers. They negotiated in good faith and earned the pensions that they are owed. It's the politicians who let all of us down by not keeping the promises which they made. The workers and retirees will need to be a major part of this solution. We've come to a point where all parties will need to take place, but they are not to blame for the problems we face. Besides, we all know where the blame game leads us. It leads us to a dead end once again. We need leadership from a select few, along with compromise by all interested parties in order to get past this stalemate. Compromise is a word that is thrown around too lightly and acted on too infrequently in politics today. Let me define compromise, in my opinion, in the context of Illinois' problems. Compromise is what happens when all parties make concessions that put their next election at risk, whether that's an elected official or a labor leader. That's the kind of compromise that President Clinton forced through in the 1993 Economic Reform Bill. The plan was so controversial that even some Democrats knew they were risking their jobs by supporting it. In fact, the Congresswoman who cast the decisive vote, the last vote in that very tight vote, was a Congresswoman by the name of Marjorie Margolis Mizvetsky of Pennsylvania. Later said she knew, even as she voted, that her support of the president would cost her her next election. And she did lose her seat in the House, and the Democrats lost control of the House of Representatives. Now that's compromise. I know that no one wants to compromise their way out of a job. It's not human nature. But if Illinois is to solve its pension problems, our state leaders need to be willing to put themselves at political risk in order to reach this deal. That won't happen until a single leader, whether the governor, the speaker, or someone else, finds a way to push all of the parties towards serious, job on the line compromise. Great leaders don't hammer out grand compromises just for the sake of winning a vote. They do it because they have a broader view of what we have to stand to gain. They usually can make it happen only after they bring the public to their side and get interest groups involved in solving this problem. That's what Ronald Reagan did when he made the deal on Social Security with Tip O'Neill. And that's what President Clinton did, and that is what President Obama is doing today. It's what Speaker Boehner will need to do to persuade his caucus to accept a real compromise with the president. This sort of bold thinking about compromise and action has not yet happened in Illinois. And until it does, we can't expect to see a solution to the problems. Against that backdrop, keep this in mind. The number of people receiving pensions from the state's 5 major funds amounts to 3% of the labor force in Illinois. We can and must solve this problem, and not just because of its direct cost. We've got to solve a problem that directly affects very few of us, so that our leaders have time to address the issues and opportunities that affect all of us. That sort of broader view is where leadership comes in. There's nothing wrong with Illinois right now that can't be fixed with better leadership. Leadership is the missing ingredient that will help us tackle the scale and complexity of our problems and seize, therefore, the opportunities before us. Leadership is about having the vision to drive us towards a future that has not yet come into focus. There are big challenges besides the pensions out there. Improving the state's unacceptable performance in education, protecting the health and welfare of our people, creating jobs that can grow our economy. The list goes on and on and on of needs. The focus on our fiscal problems is crowding out our ability to address these other vital key issues. Education is a case in point. As co-chairman of Advance Illinois, I've been to community meetings and heard parents agonize about how Illinois' poor report card on education affects their hopes and dreams for their kids. Advance Illinois has worked with educators, families, elected officials, and state education leaders to propose and implement ideas that will help us gain ground. But a lack of attention on education has cost us a chance to make progress. In a federal program called Race to the Top, Illinois lost out on a grant of over $400 million that went to 11 different states. We lost chiefly because not enough school districts were ready to support statewide reform and improvement. And we failed to develop a strategy to make sure that our poor school systems and districts have skilled teachers that they need. Energy is another place where we could be moving forward. Illinois has remarkable natural resources, vast stores of natural gas and great surges of wind energy. But when it comes to energy, we stand on a wobbly two-legged stool of nuclear power and coal. Every state that touches Illinois uses a higher percentage of renewable resources than we do. Indiana has similar gas resources, but produces 20 times more natural gas than Illinois. By some estimates, we could help create nearly 50,000 jobs simply by updating the state's laws on gas exploration, and we can do so while vigorously protecting our environment. And just as President Obama has called for an all of the above energy strategy for America, we need an all of the above strategy for Illinois. We should be searching across the country for ideas that can help bring prosperity to our state. But instead, we've been forced to look inward at problems that should have been fixed years ago. In Ohio, a program called Third Frontier has helped lure or create more than 600 technology companies and 55,000 jobs. It has been paid for largely with state-issued bonds. We need good ideas like Ohio's Third Frontier, and we need strength in the state's balance sheet so Illinois' ability to issue bonds for productive purposes is not hurt by the overhang of pension debt and shaky finances. The state's balance sheet is supposed to be there to help improve our economy, not contribute to its decline. Former Fed Chairman Paul Volcker and former New York financier Richard Vavich released a report earlier this year declaring that Illinois has one of the most serious fiscal problems in America. Moody's and others are raising questions about our future. But Illinois is not a weakling. We have great strengths and even greater potential. And because the potential is so great, it is worth the fight that will be needed to fix the problems in front of us. It's no wonder the people of Illinois hunger for leadership. They can see our potential. They know better than any of us the potential in our state. And they can see how our future is being held back in a seemingly endless skirmish that has not seen significant progress in years. We need to get past the state's fiscal troubles so we can focus on the farms and factories, the schools and roads, the ports and highways that can make us stronger. We can't let the legacy of bad decisions from the 20th century prevent us from erecting wind farms, developing gas fields, and building the technology incubators of the 21st century. I believe the people of Illinois are hungry for leadership that says, of course we can solve the pension problem and then make our schools stronger. We're willing to take on the tough issues because the problems of our state must not stand in the way of the potential of our state. This is the way for Illinois to become an economic powerhouse for decades to come. Vision like that, determination like that. Leadership means fighting for reform of our schools and improvement in our schools, not just reform. It means building an economic strategy that attracts businesses and jobs and investment rather than driving them away. And yes, leadership means standing up for the health and welfare of pensioners in Illinois who worked hard for the state and do deserve security and stability. Vision, determination, compromise, empathy, and savvy. These are the ingredients of leadership, and they've been the missing ingredients all too often in our state under many leaders for many years. What I know from the experience is that leaders can persuade the people to take on tough problems so long as they're working towards big solutions. If our leaders show they have a vision, then the people of our state will help them achieve it. My dad believed that good government is good politics, and good politics is good government. That's a lesson we sometimes forget. In the age of the permanent campaign, our leaders often think too much about politics and too little about governing, and not enough about the people who elected them. The result often is predictable: lousy politics and lousy government, an electorate that feels frustrated by both. We can do better. We must do better. Doesn't matter whether we're Republicans or Democrats or independents, from Chicago or the suburbs or downstate. Whether you're in the governor's office or in business or workplaces all over Illinois, we can all take responsibility to act, and we can insist that those in the positions of leadership get this job done. When that's our mindset, we can tackle the problems of today, but more importantly, begin forging a future that's worthy of this great state. Thank you very much, and happy holidays to all of you.
There'll be a few minutes for questions. By the way, let's give a hand to City Club member B here. She's going to go to UIC Nursing School starting in January. Brenda. From Chris Roebling. Oh, got a lot of fans here, Chris. I'll read this question because I'm sure none of you have thought of it. Will you run for governor in 2014?
Look at, I have commented on this before. I've said that I'm thinking about it seriously. We are a ways off. People are tired of campaigning. As I mentioned in my remarks, this is about governing now, and everyone in this room should play a part in that. The elected officials that are here, the members of the state senate or the house, the governor, the other statewide elected officials, but everybody's got to be in this one, because this is a big problem. And I think just because people comment on things, we shouldn't assume that they're going to run. And just because they comment on things doesn't mean they won't run. Okay? So I think it's something I've given serious thought to. But more importantly right now, we've got to help them solve the problem so that we get a better future.
I believe that answered your question, Mr. Roebling. Okay. Question with that very nice handwriting from Christine Hefner, Center for American Progress. I'll just paraphrase the beginning. The business community has been vocal in highlighting problems in the state. What else do you think the business leaders could do to get an improved result?
Look, the business community has been out there at the forefront, and there's been a lot of tension between the business community, the labor community, political community. Some people think they've gone too far. They've expended, whether it's the commercial club, the civic committee, they've been very involved in this, and they should be. They've got many of the business leaders, I don't care if you're a big business or a small business, medium size, you've got a lot invested in this state, and they're worried, and they should be. We all should be. So I think what they can do is realize that this is difficult. I've been in politics, I've been in business, I've been in government. It's tough for business people to understand the complexity of governing. You know, you take over a company, and you generally have a board that you kind of control, more often than not. You can come into a company and have 100 people, and you pretty much could really fundamentally change that company. It's not that way in government. And that's why during the last election, when people would talk about Governor Romney and his being a CEO and how important that was to being president, that ain't exactly the criteria that guarantees success. And so they've got to understand that there is a lot more than just solving the fiscal problem. We've got to give hope to people that if we solve that problem, and there's serious sacrifice, which there will have to be for everyone, and everything is going to have to be on the table. You know, the issue of revenue, we're going to have to look at that and say, how real is our revenue for the 21st century? Is our tax structure based upon a world that's changed fundamentally? People shouldn't be scared of those discussions. We've got to have them, but have them in a serious way. And so they've got to understand that it is not as simple as what they may run into in their boardroom and in their companies to get the results. And their frustration, I understand, but they've got to stay pushing the system. But also, as they push, they've got to be willing to bend a little when there is a compromise that comes.
Seeing no other questions, no other one, how about a big round of applause for our speaker?